Hello, everyone, and welcome to the pre-show for Coffee and Real Estate Live Chat for December of 2025. Thanks for joining me. Let's see if do we have anybody up and with us yet? Not quite yet. We just kicked it off, so it might take a few minutes for folks to come in. As we wrap up the year, we've got a lot of interesting data to cover, so we'll get into that at the official time when we start off at 10. If you have any questions or comments that you'd like to make, feel free to do them in the chat. Now, one thing to bring up early is the old page on Facebook where I used to post these. Facebook's changed the way live streaming works. So that's not going to be happening there anymore. I actually have two entity pages on Facebook. One was originally just for my podcast, which I've been doing since 2007. And the other one was really focused more on just my business. So one was sort of White Lawn Sons Real Estate, and the other one was Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. So there's some sort of a numerical requirement in terms of how many folks you have following on a page in order for you to be able to live stream. And apparently the White Lawn Sons Real Estate one doesn't make it. So the Real Estate Realities one does. So I've moved the show over to there for the Facebook stream. So feel free to consume it there. In the future, that's where it's going to be. Who knows? Maybe I'll just migrate everything over to the Real Estate Realities page entirely. But, of course, there's always YouTube, LinkedIn, X, all of those wonderful places. And as we usually do, I'm going to go ahead and check here and see what we've got going on the other channels. So let me just do that real quick. I want to make sure. I know Facebook's going, or at least that's what Facebook is telling me. So what I'd like to do now is just sort of get an idea of what's happening on YouTube, particularly since YouTube is sort of now. There we go. Yeah, YouTube's working just fine. I'm not really going to worry about LinkedIn. I guess X I should worry about. I get a lot of people reaching out to me via X, which is interesting. Yeah, it says I'm live, and it shows the live stream. So there we go. We are there. Oh, and it looks like there's somebody on X watching. Fantastic. All right. Great. So there's lots of things we could talk about. One thing I've done, and let me see if I can publish it now. For some reason, it won't let me. There we go. I've just activated a poll. I think that's the first time I've done that. So I guess that's right. Okay, it says it's active. There's a little green line saying it's active. So anyway, I'm interested in what people think about the 50-year mortgage. And that's something we could talk about during the show if you like. And I hope you've got your favorite coffee with you for today's show. I do not. I already had my morning coffee. I actually started much earlier than usual today. Because there's some other things I want to do today. So I'm just about the electrolytes during today's show. And I'm having trouble getting this stuff to dissolve. A lot of it's just sticking at the bottom. But anyway, so today it is electrolytes in real estate for me. For you, I hope it's coffee in real estate. Maybe it's your own brew. Maybe it's something you make yourself. Maybe it's your favorite Pete's or Starbucks, whatever it might be, or some other local guy. I don't know why it has placed this poll over me. Oh, is it over the video? Is that what happens? I guess okay, so it shows it as over my face on Facebook. It won't show up anywhere else. It'll only be on Facebook. So I'd love to hear back from you folks on what you think about the 50-year mortgage. I'm always sort of a more options guy, but sometimes those options are a death trap waiting just for you to step in it. So we can chat about that. For those of you who have been consumers of my podcast, yes, it has been creeping up on a year since the last podcast, and I apologize for that. The reason was really, I had so many people. Oh, look at that. Something went wrong with comments on Facebook. Okay, now it's back. I've had so many people reach out to me. There's this huge chunk of people that really want to monetize the podcast. I get people soliciting to come on and get interviewed. I have people wanting me to review their books. And I found a lot of people who were wanting to give me advice on how to make it that thing that generates cash, and things I should talk about and things I shouldn't talk about, topics I should avoid. And the podcast originally started as a way to sound as loud of an alarm as I could and as big a way as I could as to things that are wrong with the real estate business. And all the advice I've been getting is that I need to stop doing that. And I think, and this was all mixed with an experience I had early last year that really kind of broke my faith in an awful lot of things relating to people in real estate, businesses that cater to realtors and other real estate agents. And I just sort of stepped away from it, and I focused on the people I've already built relationships with was kind of my 2025. And that's fine. I mean, I think everybody once in a while needs to do that. But I think in 2026, I'm going to maybe do a return to form on the podcast, where the goal is simply to educate. That's it, right? There's none of this. There's no ulterior motives. There's none of this other stuff that so many people. I got invited to actually join a, what would you call it? Sort of a platform of many different podcasters, but the list of stuff that they wanted in terms of like approval, things I had to talk about, things I had to say I liked, it was too long. So I decided not to do that. I would have really hated myself if I had gotten involved in that. But anyway, all that being what it is, my plan if not in the last week or two of 2025, within the first couple of weeks of 2026, is to return to the podcast and have chats with you on a regular basis. Obviously, it's one way on a podcast. I love the idea of doing things live, but frequently we do this and I don't get to talk to you live, right? Folks will consume this as a playback. So I'll get some interaction, but I get individual interaction. I like it when we can talk live in front of all these other folks that might be watching, so that everybody can benefit, right, from the back and forth. So I'd love to get this to that point. So in the spirit of that, I would also, and I also hate lobbying people for stuff that's really just to help me or my show or whatever. But I'd love for folks to share this with other people. I'd love to get the number of followers who are aware of the show increased. I feel like there's great value in understanding what's going on. And these are numbers I think anybody who lives in the area benefits from knowing, just having a passing knowledge of, so that you're aware of what's going on in your market. And who knows, maybe there's this threshold that some people are looking for, where if numbers reached a certain point, they would say to themselves, wow, now is the time I should start thinking about selling my home. And the reality is, the earlier you start having those thoughts, the better. Like, for instance, if you wanted to sell your home in 2026, you should already be having conversations with whoever your chosen real estate person is. Now, hopefully it's me. I would love it to be me. I would at least love the opportunity to prove that I'm your best choice. But if not, if you've got somebody else, maybe it's a family member, or maybe it's just somebody you like better than me, you should start having that conversation now. You should create a punch list of the things that you should do before you put your house on the market. I've sold an awful lot of houses, and I have definitely encountered an awful lot of houses that were ready to put on the market the day that those sellers called me. Definitely. And the one home just jumps to mind in San Martin I sold a few years back. It was just in amazing show-ready state the day I walked into it. Most of us don't live in houses like that. I don't. I mean, I would need, if I'm going to sell my house in 2026, which is, there's a fairly good chance that's going to happen, I've already started working on various parts of my home. Things I just didn't care about, that weren't that big of a deal to me, or that were simply a cosmetic thing in a part of the house no one else really sees. Things. I'm a person who takes good care of my house, but I don't really. I don't care about an awful lot of things in terms of worrying about a cosmetic thing that would be a negative when you're trying to sell your home. So the earlier you can get that list and see how much of it is stuff you can do versus how much is stuff you have to hire someone to do it, um, is super valuable to you. And it may give you a lot more breathing room, right? If you are thinking about selling in 2026 and you start that conversation in November and December and January, you may discover you have very little to do, right? It looks like we've got somebody on YouTube. Thanks for joining. Are these numbers always right? I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, if you'd like to ask any questions, we're in the pre-show portion of the day. So we're talking about anything that you want to talk about. Of course, we'll be hitting the normal real estate stuff as soon as the 10 o'clock hour hits. We've got about 3.5 minutes till that comes along. If you're a new person to the show, my name's Robert Whitelaw. I'm a licensed real estate broker right here in Silicon Valley, and I have been doing this since 1988. That's a very long time. And I help folks buy and sell and invest in real estate. So, and if you'd like to reach out to me, you can find me at soldbyrobert.com. What else? We got about 3 minutes to go until we kick off. What else? Anything else exciting has happened recently? I don't, I can't think of anything else that's been particularly awesome that's happened lately. But share what's happened awesome to you. Maybe that person who's watching on YouTube or that new person who just logged in on LinkedIn. Maybe one of you folks would like to ask a question or bring up something cool. I always use the end of the year as a way to think back, what's gone right, what's gone wrong. And as I mentioned earlier, for me, 2025 was very much a step back year. Stop listening to so many people that were pounding the drum of sterile promotion instead of authentic promotion, I guess is the way to put it. I definitely like to lean into this being authentic. That way I never have to remember what I said to somebody. If I said something to X and then I say something else to Y, I'd rather just be authentic. If that costs me business, well, that's fine. Then that cost me business. But authenticity gives you clarity of thought, right? You don't have to remember what story you told to what person and the thing that also annoys me about so many of the people that are quote unquote pros in this business are how much actual deception there is involved. Well, you just say this, you phrase it like this, but the numbers, yeah, but if you're making a general enough statement, right? We could get onto the subject of top producing agents. When you look at the stats for most top producing agents, the numbers that they are top in have nothing to do with a good experience for buyers or sellers, right? It's about the number of homes they sold or how much money they grossed in that year or quarter. This is a story I've told probably a bunch of times. But I remember when I first got into the business, so early 90s, everybody wanted that little top 1% agent. It was like this little gold medallion you could get put on your business cards and stuff like that. So I remember, and it was maybe my second year, maybe my third year, and 3 or 4 of us who were super young came in at the same time. And one of them, one of the guys that came in with me, put that on his card and he showed us his new card. And I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? You aren't in the top 1% of anything, not in listings, not in sales, not in grosses, nothing. And he goes, well, yes, I am. If you do it by height, because he was like 6'6" or something. So yes, doing it by height, he was the top producing agent. He was the top, but of course he wouldn't tell anyone what the metrics were. Which and sadly, that's how an awful lot of this stuff works. And sometimes they'll do it by people in the office, and particularly if it's a small office of just a handful of agents, that's an easy one. But anyway, so here we are. It is 10 o'clock. It is time to start the Coffee and Real Estate live chat. I appreciate you spending your time with me today. I realize your time is valuable, and I like to keep it just right on the money with the numbers. For those of you who have just arrived, my name is Robert Whitelaw. I'm a licensed real estate broker right here in California. Started in 1988. Been helping buyers, sellers, and investors achieve their real estate goals ever since. If I can be of any service to you, or if you'd like to consider me as one of the folks that you're interviewing for the job of helping you reach your real estate goals, feel free to find me at soldbyrobert.com. Plenty of ways to reach out to me there. Just click on the Contact Robert button, and We can figure it out. See if I can't help you reach your goals. All right, let's go ahead and jump in. I've got a poll running. If you're on Facebook, you can see it. If you're not on Facebook, you can't. And the poll is, are you excited about the opportunity to potentially get a 50-year mortgage? We can talk about that more towards the end of the show, but I'd love to see where your head is at in terms of what do you think about the 50-year mortgage? Okay, let's go ahead and jump in and start doing the numbers. For those of you who are relatively new to this, we start off with the year-to-year numbers, right? Meaning today we are talking about the numbers we have for November and comparing it to the same time last year. So comparing 2025 to 2024. And the reason we do that is to eliminate all of the funky seasonal things, right? Because a November is very similar to another November. Same weather, same kinds of things going on in people's minds. Comparing a November to a July is dumb, right? And we have some of that dumbness in some of the news articles we're going to talk about coming up here in a few minutes. But for right now, let's go ahead and just talk about the total homes on market. This is the inventory number. If you're a buyer, this is the total number of homes that are available for you to buy right now. It's the houses on the shelves that you have to choose from. If you're a seller, this is your competition. How many other homes are there on the market that are competing with you for the attention of buyers? We'll start off with Santa Clara County. Obviously, largest sample size. Santa Clara County is huge. Last year, the total homes on market were 1,189. This year, the total number of homes on the market is 1,411. That's a 19% increase from the same time last year. In San Jose, that number is up 17%. We had 582 homes on the market in San Jose in November of 2024. In November of 2025, that number is up to 683. In Morgan Hill, it's up 36%. 64 homes on the market in Morgan Hill in November of 2024. In November of 2025, that's up to 87. In Gilroy, up 3%, which I think is kind of interesting. Gilroy is always an outlier in many of these stats, but 76 homes last year in November of 2024. In November of 2025, we've got 78 homes. So basically a wash, given the sample size, the small number of transactions and homes that get listed and that type of thing that happen in Gilroy. That's basically a wash, but it's interesting to see it sort of being on the same plane as it was last year, whereas we've seen much bigger shifts in that in the other communities. Next, let's go ahead and talk about the total number of homes sold. Not universally positive numbers, which is a shocker. I actually had to check this number twice to make sure it was correct. This is the total number of homes that closed escrow in November of 2025 versus November of 2024. So we saw an increase of 2% in Santa Clara County. So 718 homes last year, 733 homes this year in 2025. San Jose saw a decrease, which is odd. San Jose is usually right on par with the county, or in many instances overperforms compared to the county overall. But in San Jose, we saw 398 homes close escrow last year, 366 homes sold in November of 2025 for an 8% drop in that number. Morgan Hill, and this is, these are new listings. This isn't homes sold. Well, I apologize. This is new listings. So no, Santa Clara County did not see 718 homes sell. They saw 718 homes list in November of 2024. In November of 2025, 733. So 2% increase in the number of homes that were added to the market. I apologize for that, man. But boy, that two very different numbers. In San Jose, we saw a decrease in the number of listings. Again, still the same thought applies. Very weird for San Jose to deviate in the opposite direction from the county overall. 398 homes were listed last year, 366 homes this year. Morgan Hill, and that's why it caught me, because this number for Morgan Hill blew me away when I first ran it, and I had to check it again. 27 homes were listed for sale in November of 2024, 48 homes listed for sale in November of 2025. That's a big deal. Just because it's a huge increase. And despite the fact we're talking about smaller sample sizes and those types of things, this is a measure of the number of people who chose to put their home on the market, and it is a dramatic increase year over year for Morgan Hill. We could take a look at all the homes that were listed in the month of November and see if there's an interesting thing to tease out. I looked at it just before the show. I didn't see anything crazy. I saw a pretty good mix of prices. It may be folks in Morgan Hill are simply seeing this as an opportunity to take out their equity. But that's something we could chat about and see what we think. Gilroy, 21 last year, November of 2024, new listings. In November of 2025, that number went up to 25, so just a 19% increase. And again, given the smaller sample sizes, don't invest too much in trying to predict what's going on with the world based on that number alone, but does so a general increase by a handful of people who chose to list their home in Gilroy in 2025 versus 2024. Next, and you know what? Yes. So now we're going to talk about homes sold. Sorry, God, boy, I don't know. I do these in the same order every time. How did I screw that up? Now, obviously, this is a big number. This is something that's very interesting because it's going to tell us a lot of things about what's happening with the market. It's going to tell us, are we adding homes to the marketplace or are we taking homes away in terms of overall inventory? So let's go ahead and take a minute to check these out. Now, in Santa Clara County, we had a 20% drop in the total number of homes sold compared to the same time last year. That's pretty big. 1,012 homes were sold last year in November of 2024. In November of 2026, that number dropped to 806. Also a drop in San Jose, 506 homes in November of 2024 versus 419 homes in November of 2025. In Morgan Hill, 29% drop, 42 homes last year, 30 homes this year. In Gilroy, 42 last year, 33 this year for a 21% drop. Again, for the folks who are just joining us, I can see we've had numbers tick up on a few of the different platforms. Feel free to ask your questions. Depending on which platform you're on, your question will appear actually on the screen in the lower corner down there. But I look over to try to see if there's a question, and I'll be happy to field it as soon as you ask it. So you don't have to wait until this part's over. So what is a big deal about this? Well, first, obviously, just understanding fewer homes are selling, fewer buyers are buying in the month of November compared to last November. So that's the first piece of information to take away. The second is, are these numbers above or below the number of new listings? So in Santa Clara County, if you'll remember, we had 733 homes listed in the month of November of 2025. So that means we sold more overall than we listed. And that's the case to the tune of 73 homes. So we pulled down the total inventory for the county by 73 homes overall. However, when we talk about San Jose and we see that the total number of homes sold, that's not right. Yep, sorry. Let me change something real quick here. Luckily it doesn't affect this, but in San Jose, we saw that we listed 419 homes, or we sold 419 homes. We listed 366. So again, we sold more homes than we listed. So that's a good trend, right? That's a more healthy market when you're selling more homes than you're listing, because that means you're not selling every home that got listed, right? You're selling a chunk of the best listings that just got listed, plus some of the old inventory. And that's a great way to flush out your inventory. So we reduced overall inventory in November by 53 homes in San Jose. In Morgan Hill, not so much. We listed 49 homes, but we sold 30 homes, which added 19 homes to the overall market in Morgan Hill. In Gilroy, we listed 25 homes, but sold 23 homes, meaning we took 8 homes away from the overall inventory of Gilroy. So overall, aside from Morgan Hill, this is pretty good news. This is a good indicator that we've seen more buyers come out and bring down these numbers and start eating into the overall inventory, not just the inventory of what got listed, but the inventory of homes that have been on the market for longer, many more days and months, right? So that's an interesting thing to note. Does it indicate a bigger change for next year? It may. This increased activity in November is always interesting. We normally don't see this. We normally see homes accumulating on the market in November. But remember, Anything that showed as closed in November likely sold in October. So likely an offer was made in October. It takes 30 days for escrow to close. Once that escrow closes, it becomes a home sold. So keep in mind that that's activity that ranges from October. But again, having a lot of activity in October is also a little bit weird. So, but moving ahead, let's go ahead and take a look at the next set of numbers here. After home sold, we look at months of inventory. Just to give you some context real quickly here, months of inventory is a number that tells us if we took the numbers for November and we froze the inventory numbers as they are, and then we froze the number of homes sold numbers, how long would it take to sell off that inventory if those numbers just stayed the same for the next few months, right? Typically, a balanced market, if you talk to folks who talk about national real estate markets, is 4 to 5 months of inventory. Well, we have not been anywhere near there ever. I think since I started doing these, maybe going all the way back to 2008, 9, 10, when things were nuts, that would be true. However, we've been below 3 months of inventory pretty much all along here. Now, if we look at the numbers, we can see in Santa Clara County, this number is up. It was 1.2 months of inventory in November of 2024. In November of 2025, it's up to 1.8 months of inventory for a 50% increase. In San Jose, 1.2 months last year, 1.6 months this year for a 33% increase. Morgan Hill, 93% increase, 1.5 months last year, 2.9 this year. So creeping up on 3 months worth of inventory in Morgan Hill, which if you realize how many homes we added to the inventory on homes sold versus listed, I think that makes sense, right? The numbers are meshing and making sense for us. In Gilroy, it's up 33%, so the same percentage as San Jose, 1.8 months of inventory last year, 2.4 months of inventory this year. Next, let's go ahead and hit homes pending or contingent. So these are homes that went under contract, meaning during the month of November, buyers made an offer and sellers accepted it. Doesn't mean it's closed. It just means there's now a contract in escrow that's going to take about 30 to 45 days to work through, and then the home will close escrow and the new buyer will own it. So this is a leading indicator of how many sold homes we should see next month, and just gives us a good calibration to how many buyers were out there buying and making offers in the month of November, both this year and last year. Now, in Santa Clara County, the number's down 15%. It was 844 homes in November of 2024, 714 homes in November of 2025. In San Jose, we saw 458 homes went pending in November of 2024, and 366 went pending in November of 2025. That's a 20% drop between those two times. I can see we've got a couple of more folks on, YouTube, it looks like. So welcome. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. Next, Morgan Hill, 32 homes last year, 32 homes this year for a wash, same as last year, so 0% change, which is kind of interesting, but still on par with last year. Gilroy down 21%, 28 homes last year, 22 homes this year went pending. And so just keep that in mind. It simply means that offers were made. Now, these could fall out. Some of them will, right? There's a variety of different reasons. The number one reason is usually financing falls through. But this will give us an indication of how many homes sold we should see in the month of December. All right. What else have we got here? Let's go to average original list price. And I continue to get real estate agents who reach out to me and ask why I cover this number. I'm not sure. Some of them are annoyed that I cover this number. This is a great number for buyers to know. And I think it's also great for sellers to know. But this is the amount of money sellers agreed to list their home for when they signed the listing agreement. So this is an expectations number, right? This is a great piece of psychology that you can use when you're a buyer. What did the seller want to get for this home when they listed it? So in the month of November, the average original list price, meaning what that very first price was in the county, $1,910,021. Last year, that number was $1,820,085 for a 4.9% increase. So overall, seller expectations were up just shy of 5%, 4.9% this year compared to last year. In San Jose, it went the other direction. It actually went down. Last year, it was $1,392,000. This year, it was $1,383,000. So almost a wash, just a few $1,000s difference, but it's a 0.6% drop from last year. Morgan Hill, and this is one that's super interesting. Morgan Hill tends to be the one that has the highest expectations year over year, but they're actually also down 0.1%. 1,749,000 last year, 1,747,000 this year. So again, pretty much a wash. Expectations haven't risen, and I think that's interesting. But it's also a pretty high number. I mean, that's 1.7 million, right, on average. In Gilroy, up 3.5%. So expectations in Gilroy are up 3.5. 1,399,000 last year in November of 2024. And in November of 2025, that number went up to 1,448,000. So, and again, this is a great insight into the expectations of sellers. Now, this is obviously a broad stroke. This is big numbers. This is overalls and averages and all those sorts of things. But if you're a buyer, these are all numbers your real estate agent has access to. And I think this is a key one. Whenever I'm working for a buyer, this is one of the first things I look up. What's the history of this home? How long has it been on the market? What were they originally asking for it? Have there been price reductions? And these are all numbers that should come together to help you figure out what the right offer is to make on a home that you really want to purchase. Next, let's talk about the number everybody wants to see, which is what is the average sales price of homes on average? And where does it compare to expectations? Where did people get more than expected in November, or did they get less than expected? And we'll cover that number too. All right, so in Santa Clara County overall, it's up 1.4%, 1,934,000. Just a crazy number. In Santa Clara County on average last year in November of 2024. In November of 2025, that number is up to 1,961,000. And these are actual sales. These are homes that closed escrow. This is what folks actually paid on average. So these aren't projections. These aren't expectations. These are what actually happened. In San Jose, down 2.4%. Last year, 1,574,000. This year, 1,535,000. So the average sales prices in San Jose actually dropped over the last year. In Morgan Hill, up 23.9%. And we can explore that more if you like. We did have one home that sold that was over $3 million, which obviously would have skewed this a little bit. But last year, the average sales price in Morgan Hill was $1,229,000. This year, $1,523,000. And because, again, of the smaller sample size, we can always expect to see any really big high number or really, really low number potentially nudge this up. But when I ran the numbers without the $3+ million home selling, it only dropped it down to 1.4 something million. So still a big jump in Morgan Hill, no matter how you slice it. Gilroy down 3.2%, 1,227,000 last year, 1,188,000 this year. Gilroy remains, I think, one of the best and underappreciated markets. Looks like Howard is with us. Do the stats include off-market sales? So typically, Howard, it does. If there's a real estate agent involved, these stats will reflect off-market sales. And I can show you exactly why that is if you hang out with me for a little while. What you'll do is, as a real estate agent, when I go in and I look at stats and I see a days on market of 0, that's an off-market sale, right? And I think we had 3 of those in Morgan Hill in November. In fact, the most expensive one, I think, is an off-market sale. But in any event, those are ones that occurred completely without putting it on the MLS, which means didn't go on to the MLS, didn't go on to Realtor.com, didn't go on to Trulia, didn't go on to Zillow, didn't go on to Redfin. This was something that was sold through the marketing of the real estate agent and their office. Now, that could have included them manually adding certain things to Trulia and Redfin and these other places. But if you see a days of 0, that's usually that's something that was agreed to without ever putting it on the market. And as a real estate agent, when you do that, you are supposed to enter that into the MLS with the 0 days. Having said that, I have clients who specifically do not want an MLS entry for their home sale. It's not a common thing. It's not statistically significant enough for us to worry about how it affects like county numbers. It could affect maybe a smaller community number if it was a really big sale or something. But typically, numbers you're going to get from this are going to be accurate enough to make decent decisions on, even with off-market sales that may not get recorded. If it's a sale that didn't involve a real estate agent at all, if it was just two parties that came together, independent of real estate agents, then it will not be in the MLS. I actually did a little research into this, and those transactions almost never happen. There's always somebody who's a real estate agent, not just a real estate agent, but a realtor, right? A real estate agent just has a license from the state. A realtor is someone who's paying the National Association of Realtors so they can participate in the MLS system. And almost all, like 99.9%, involve a real estate agent who's also a realtor. If you have a more specific concern relating to off-market sales, feel free to ask. I'll be happy to cover it. But I think we covered this, right? We covered all the average sales price stuff to see what direction things are going. It's a little bit mixed. But we'll make some predictions once we cover the rest of the data. All right. And you know what? I'm going to remove that because it's some stuff that's in my way, and I'd rather see your comments than some of these other things that are popping up. All right. I don't know what's going on with that. Where are we at? Over under asking price. Now, this is one we've been tracking for a while, and this is just like we had some insights into the psychology of the seller, right? With original list price. This is an opportunity to look into the mindset of buyers, because this represents people paying over asking price. If it was 100% across the board, that would mean on average, everybody's paying what the list price is. Now, you can get into some nuance here because there's obviously some wiggle room in the middle relating to, well, maybe the real estate agent just priced it too low or too high, and then it moved because of that. It's almost never because they priced it too low. It's almost always because they priced it too high. But let's go ahead and just cover these numbers and we can chat about them. So last year in Santa Clara County, the amount folks were paying for a home was about 104% of asking price, meaning they were paying 4% over the list price of the home at the time. And remember, these numbers aren't relating to original price. This is relating to what the price was at the time the buyer made the offer that was accepted. So this is a look into the mind of a buyer who was willing to write up a contract where they were paying 4% over asking price. In Santa Clara County, that number dropped to 102.8% for November of 2025 for a net change of 1.2%, a decline of 1.2%. In San Jose last year, November of 2024, 103.7, so 3.7% over asking price, dropped down to 102.4 for a net 1.3% decrease. So in November, folks were paying on average in San Jose 2.4% over asking price. In Morgan Hill, it was down 1.6%, 101.3% last year. This year, 99.7%. So paying just a little under asking price, about 0.3% under asking price. In Gilroy, 102.2 in November of 2024. In November of 2025, that number dropped to 99.3, so about 0.7 below asking price for a net 2.9% drop. So we can see, obviously, there are places where it's a little bit more competitive. If you're walking into Morgan Hill or Gilroy, offering at asking price or below on average is a decent strategy. In San Jose and Santa Clara County overall, on average, people are paying more. However, it's all about hyper localized markets, right? So as you're going through this process as a buyer, you would expect your agent to run numbers. If you tell your agent, hey, I love this house and I want to make an offer on it, your agent should do a couple of things as a result of that conversation. First, they should do a market analysis on the property as if they were going to list it and prove to you, the buyer, what that home is worth given comparable properties, right? And as someone who has probably looked at a bunch of homes in that neighborhood, you're going to be calibrated to what you're getting for your money. And you'll be able to get a good insight into that comparability by looking at what's already sold, right? And get a feeling for it. The other thing is, on average in this marketplace, here's what it should be. In this marketplace, for the homes that have sold over the last 6 months, did they tend to sell above or below asking price, right? So those are all good things that you're going to know if your agent's doing the right job for you. So make sure these are things that you're pushing for, that your agent delivers if they're representing you as a buyer's agent. All right, next, let's see here. One thing I didn't talk about was expectations versus reality on sales prices. So I'll just go down those numbers real quick. So in Santa Clara County, overall, reality was beating expectations. So if you'll remember, we talked about in overall original list price in Santa Clara County was $1,910,021. The average sales price was $1,961,000, which means that on average, sellers were making $51,815 above expectations. In San Jose, people were getting $152,029 above expectations, but in Morgan Hill and Gilroy, both were getting, Morgan Hill was getting 223 below expectations, 223,000 below expectations, and Gilroy was getting 259,000 below expectations. So overall in the county, sellers are being satisfied. They're not only getting what they're asking for, they're getting about $50,000 more. Next, let's talk about days on market. And obviously, this is an increasing number. Gilroy with the sharpest increase. Now, Santa Clara County, 25 days on market last year in terms of days on market, 30 days this year for November of 2025. In San Jose, 24 days on the market in November of 2024. In November of 2025, it was 29 days with a 21% increase. Morgan Hill saw a 28% increase, 25 days last year, 32 days this year. And Gilroy with the biggest jump, a 53% jump in Gilroy from 34 days last year to 52 days this year for November of 2025. Now, days on market is one of those numbers every buyer should know when they're considering making an offer on a house. The higher the number of days on market, the more aggressive you should potentially consider going with your offer in terms of below asking price. Something to calibrate you to when it comes to days on market. Anything under about 18 days is not likely to be seen. Right around 18 days or in that ballpark or less is usually artificial at what it's at. Meaning, real estate agents will typically list a home and say, we're not going to look at any offers until such and such a date and time. If you want to make an offer on this house, make an offer on this date, no later than this time. And that's usually 2 weeks to 2.5 weeks out. Sometimes it's as little as 10 days. But in my world, I like to do 2 weeks because I want to have 2 weekends of open houses. I know a lot of real estate agents like to say open houses are not productive. It's just, and they will sell sellers on not doing open houses because it's just a way for agents to get more clients. While that may be true today, I don't think it's ever been more true than it is today that because agents will tell you, oh, I never sell a house to someone who came to the open house. That has been completely the opposite for at least 5 years. I think in the last 2 years of homes I've sold, I think every single one of them sold to an open house. Now, granted, in many of those cases, those folks came with their agent to the open house. But the point is, the time slot that was chosen to view the home was during an open house. In fact, I had a home I sold right here in Morgan Hill a year and a half ago that almost nobody showed it at all, except during open houses. And open houses were slammed. I had dozens of people at every open house I did for that place. So everybody is leaning into the convenience of the open house, whether it's agents who don't want to use their realtor key for whatever reason. It could be agents, and this is something that might be interesting for Howard to consider because with his question about off-market sales, because you can sell real estate as a real estate agent and not be a realtor. If you're not a realtor, you wouldn't have an MLS key. And an MLS key is what lets you open that little blue box that's attached to a home for sale if it's listed by a real estate agent who's a realtor. If you're a real estate agent who doesn't want to be a realtor anymore because you don't see the power in it, and that is starting to be something that's happening, very small numbers, but it's happening, then as a real estate agent, you would want to use whatever easy way there is to get into that house. Now, regardless of how you feel as a real estate agent about what's going on with the Association of Realtors and the MLS and all these other things, the bottom line is the goal is to do the absolute best job for your seller and the absolute best job for your buyer. And if you want to do that, open houses are a requirement. And I realize I've gone into the weeds. I apologize. I was just talking about days on market. But the point being, anything over 18 days is a real number, meaning they didn't get tons of offers right up front. And what's amazing to me is in Santa Clara County, we've got 30 days on market. And yet we still have, on average, the average is 30 days on the market. We can take a look in a minute at how there's homes that have been on the market for hundreds of days. And yet we still have folks paying, what did we see when we just looked? 2.8% above asking price. Because that implies multiple offers, right? We don't live in a world where you're going to offer over asking price when no one else is also making bids on the house, right? I wouldn't. So why are we seeing 2.8% above asking price and 30 days to get a home sold on average? So the one possible reality is that buyers are simply not feeling as rushed to make the decision to buy, so they're holding off. But still, when you come to that point, why are you, and particularly in a place like Gilroy, but we see in Gilroy, it is below asking price. In Morgan Hill, it is below asking price. But again, Santa Clara County and Morgan Hill are pretty darn close in terms of days on market. All right, sorry. There's sort of random thoughts there. Next. Well, that's wrong. Well, that's weird. One of my slides is gone. The price reductions slide is gone. We'll go back to it here in a second. All right. So now we're going to this is where we're switching gears. We are looking at month over month. So we're no longer doing year over year, right? So keep that in mind. Now what we're trying to spot are trends that will give us insights into what's going to happen with the market as we move forward. So let's get the cursor over here so y'all can see it. You can see that in terms of total active listings, we see a big drop. And if you look at previous years for the same month, that's what the red bar is. That's similar. We see a peak right around September. 2023 was a weird year. Anyway, because that's beginning of 2023 is when we had the interest rates go crazy in March. But in any event, we have elevated volume in 2025, but this looks very similar, right? I mean, it's right on par. So if we assume that the trend is going to be the same, I think we can see that we're going to bottom out in December in terms of total inventory, right? So we've got one more month of data in 2025, and I think we'll hit the bottom, and then we'll see it dramatically increase in January. That has always been the way. January has always tended to see that first big jump in inventory. And what's interesting is over decades, this has changed. It used to be this didn't start happening until a little further into the year, till March, right? Now it's happening earlier, but you can see we had a really big jump. And then in March, April, we hit our peak for a couple of months, and then it starts to decline. I don't see anything that's going on right now that would change the shape of this curve. The intensity, the volume might change a bit, but I think what we're seeing here is really what we're going to see as we move through 2026. Next, let's talk about the total new listings. We can see a big drop here in new listings. And again, and look at how low that is. It wouldn't be surprising to me if we see new listings had really dropped back in 2023. But if we go with this, we should expect to see a continuing drop in new listings. So bottoming out in December, which is, again, typical, but it's interesting to see where we're currently at. This is where we are this month. This is where we are last year at the same time. So we may go a little lower on this. And a lot of this simply depends on the psychology of homeowners at the moment? Do homeowners believe this is the time, right? Is 2026 the year to sell your home? Do I do my profit taking now? And then that'll be a good indicator of what's going to happen in January, and then the rise of this number that we'll definitely see. There's no question we'll see a rise. It's a question of how much of a rise once we get further into the year. All right, next. Homes sold. We can see a dip last year into November. Look at the dramatic difference. Homes sold in 2023. That is a giant drop in homes sold, right? Much more dramatic. Now, we'll continue to see decreasing, but given the quick, high volume change, the downward trend of sold homes, I think this number continues. I think we bottom out. And remember, homes sold is a month late compared to when it was actually agreed to, right? A sold home is only sold once it's been in contract for anywhere from 30 to 45 days. So the reason why these two numbers aren't lined up is because this is the month when the offer was made and accepted, and then this is the month when it closed, right? So the actual decision was made in the month of December, and then in the month of January is when escrow closed and the decision was consummated, right? So that's why they're off by a month. The mindset, the market influences, all the stuff that make this number happen still happened during this month, right? All right, so we will probably continue to see a dramatic drop. It could, and if the home sold, if this slope remains the same, it could be much worse than last year. Given that trend, it wouldn't surprise me if that's the case. So very interesting that we are seeing such a dramatic drop in homes sold. Particularly, look at how it's crossing over the new listings. I mean, it's kind of nuts. But anyway, all right. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. A unprecedented drop in home sales might just be the thing. Now, pending, look at how much pending dropped. That suggests much fewer homes sold next month. So this gray line, our prediction that it's likely to be very low next month, that's our crystal ball. That yellow line is our crystal ball confirming. Now, if this was higher, then we could say, okay, well, the slope of this is going to change between now and next month. Nope. It's going to be worse, right? Because fewer homes are going into escrow. Fewer homes are going into contract to be sold. So I think that's very interesting. And the fact that we're going to see a dramatic drop in home sales is concerning. But we'll see what happens. We won't see it in December, right? We'll see it in January. We'll see what happens with the number of homes that get listed. But that is a interesting data point to be thinking about. All right, now let's talk about Santa Clara County list price versus sales price. It's always interesting when these ones cross each other. Right now, we're in a world where the average sales price is above the average list price, right? And we talked about that. So homes on average are selling for over. We can see that in November of last year, same thing happened. We can see that in November of 2023, the opposite happened. But again, 2023 was weird. Remember, March is when interest rates went through the roof, so things were weirdly impacted. Historically, we don't see this big of a distance between these two things, right? In terms of list price versus sales price. So, and again, a month late. These are homes that would have been agreed to during the month of October that closed in November. My expectation is that we will see next month, again, like we saw here, these two numbers switch, and we will see average list price and average sales price be either very, very close, or we might even see, on average, homes selling for below list price. We'll see. For just a month slideshow of data. We'll see how that goes. But it wouldn't be surprising to me if they're either extremely close or they switch place for December. Next, let's talk about Santa Clara County percent of asking price to get an idea of the trends here. Really interesting because February, and again, remember, if you're looking at this kind of a digit for February, that means the offer was made in January, because this is a piece of data that comes from sold homes, right? Look at February. Just always, poof, just goes crazy. The reason is because more buyers are coming out and competition increases in those first few months of the year. So you're seeing many more multiple offers on properties. And then it tends to, and interestingly enough, notice how it's not at its peak in July and August, right? It did do that in 2023, but remember, 2023 was weird. That's again, we had the giant increase in interest rates in March. It started in March and escalated all the way through November, December. So weirdness in 2023. But this is when it kicks off, February, March, and April, which actually, and the reason why I keep repeating this is because, in other words, you as a seller need to be prepared for this a month ahead of this data. So in other words, if we're going to predict that this same trend is going to happen in the coming months, and I don't see any reason why it won't, you don't need to be ready for it in February. You need to be ready for it in January, because that's when the offer is going to come in that's going to get you that 7.5% over asking price. Does that make sense? All right. So where do I think we're going to go? Well, if we look at the trend from November, we look at November back here, we can see there was another drop and again a drop. So the trend is typically it goes down, and then after November, it goes down again. We can see that November and December, there was a drop, and then it stays flat or perhaps even goes down a little bit. The numbers for January, which would reflect December sales. And then it just jumps like crazy. I think we'll see the exact same thing. Will we see it go up this high? I doubt it. Given what we're seeing with home sold numbers. Now remember, pending and sales numbers both stunk this month, and the trend shows much bigger decreases in pending and sales, which would suggest a higher inventory, which should keep this number depressed. Will it still be over 100%? Yeah, I mean, I'm tired of predicting that it's going to change over and start being under 100% for the county overall. Despite market influences, I think would push it to that point. Hasn't happened, so I'm not going to claim that here today. But I think it will be definitely lower than that 107.5 number. Okay, next. Let's take a look at Santa Clara County days on market. Really, I mean, this is very seasonal, right? And you see big peaks in January, right? Those are when the peaks are. The reason that there are peaks in January is we saw dramatic increases in the amount of buyer activity in January. So I think that's reflective of this, right? It hits its peak, remember, because this is more reflective of the month before in terms of if you buy the house, if it goes into escrow, the month that you bought it is 1 month later than the month you made the offer on it, right? Just kind of keep that in your head. But this is actually not a bad thing. This simply means more homes. This is likely associated with an increase in overall sales because what you're seeing is older inventory is selling. So we're seeing a jump in the average days on market. So don't think of that as a sudden boost in activity on the market rather than, oh no, homes are taking much longer to sell. Well, there was a boost in interest, which brought homes that had been on the market forever into being sold, and that's what boosted that number. I hear this number misinterpreted by real estate agents so frequently, it kind of makes me cry a little bit inside. Okay, now here's the slide I thought we missed before. This is a rundown of price reductions. In Santa Clara County last month, we had 29% of homes had a price reduction. This month, 20% had a price reduction. And that's comparing year over year, that's a 39% increase from the same time last year in terms of total number of homes that have had a price reduction. In San Jose, last month's number was 31%. This month's number is 22%. It's a 40% increase from the same time last year. Morgan Hill, 30% last year. 30% last month, 14% this month, and that's a 0% change from the same time last year. So in other words, a year ago, 14% of homes on the market in Morgan Hill had a price reduction. Gilroy, 26% of homes had a price reduction last month. 17% had a price reduction this month. and 13%. It is 13% lower this month than it was a year ago. So interesting stuff going on in Morgan Hill and Gilroy. And Gilroy, again, I keep saying it is an outlier, but I've been seeing increased activity in Gilroy or increased interest in Gilroy, and I think that's one reason that's feeding this. And Gilroy historically has been a little bit better at pricing itself. Gilroy has tended to be smart and not price their homes hundreds of thousands of dollars above what the market indicates it should be. Morgan Hill does that from time to time. Areas of San Jose do that from time to time. Gilroy has historically been a little better about it. So what does this tell us? It tells us overall in the county and in San Jose, lots of folks are having to reduce their prices. Tells us fewer or not so much is happening in Morgan Hill and Gilroy. And I guess we'll kind of peg that with they're just making better choices. They're picking better. They're more calibrated to the numbers. Okay. So that's it for the stats. Does anybody have a question about stats? I would love to, if you've got a question, if you want to talk a little bit more deeply about some of these numbers, totally happy to entertain that for you. Let's see here. Just going to scroll back and see if I've got any comments here that folks want to, that I haven't seen. It looks like Howard's the only guy who's asked a question. And again, I'm happy to talk more about off-market sales. But if you are an investor, buyer, seller, at this point in the reality we are faced with, I would not assume that enough off-market sales are happening to influence the numbers we're talking about here, particularly when we're talking about county-wide numbers. Obviously, if one off-market transaction happens in a smaller community like Morgan Hill or Gilroy, there could be a larger potential miss. But it's so as I said, I've done some off-market transactions where my seller specifically said they did not want any of this information entered into the MLS. I've been doing this over 35 years, and I think that's happened, I don't know, like 10 times tops. And they just do it for privacy reasons. They don't want it in the database. And I've had that happen in San Martin. I've had it happen in San Jose. I had it happen in Los Altos. I had it happen in Palo Alto and Los Gatos. So I've had it happen all at once in Santa Cruz. I think I had it happen. So it can happen anywhere. But if I had run the numbers with that house included, the home I sold, if I ran those numbers again with those houses included, would it have impacted the overall stats? No, it would not. There's even one I did in San Diego way back in the early 90s. It was they didn't want anything entered. It was a multi-residential unit. It was like a huge apartment complex. But anyway, that was me and a team of 3 agents that was working on that one. That one was nuts. But anyway, so that's it for that. Now I always do like to pause at the end of the stats, give everybody a chance to take a deep breath, take a swig of that favorite coffee. I will take a sample of my favorite electrolyte mix. Because I already drank my coffee this morning. But now we can jump into some of the news items, have conversations about what specifically. It's Howard asking again if he's interested in pocket deals. So pocket deal, let's talk about what a pocket deal is. Maybe no one knows what that is. I am not a fan of pocket deals. I do not think you are doing if you're an agent and you're doing a pocket listing, you are not doing what I think, and you're doing it if your client is telling you to do it, right? That you got to do what your client wants you to do, but they need to be fully informed. You are closing the door on the best way to get eyeballs on your property if you as a seller are doing a pocket listing with an agent. Now, why do a pocket listing? Typically, the big winner in a pocket listing is your agent, because one of the goals is to keep both the listing and selling, so in other words, the buyer's agent and listing agent, keeping that within the same brokerage. That is completely legal in California. In fact, in many cases, what you'll find is the listing agent and the buyer's agent are the same human being. I am not a fan of that either. I think that is a conflict of interest, and I believe that if I worked at a brokerage and I had someone who wanted to do a pocket listing for some reason, I would ask another agent in the office to represent any buyers that come along, just because I think that's ethically the right thing to do. It's not the most profitable thing to do for me personally, but ethically, I think that is the right thing to do. Now, if you're an investor, the way Howard is talking, I'm getting sort of an investor vibe. Pocket listings can be good because if you're a buyer, you've completely eliminated 80% of the competition, right? And that's a generous number. It's probably closer to 95% of the competition. There is no single office in existence that can get better eyeballs on your property than the MLS, Trulia, and Zillow. They don't exist. But the reason why they do a pocket listing is because they only want buyers to come in through them. They don't want the potential potpourri of agents that might be working with a seller, with a buyer. They want to have it all be in-house. Now, let's say you're Howard. Howard just said yes, and I'm assuming the yes was he's an investor kind of guy. So what Howard wants to do is, okay, so let's say Howard wanted advice from Robert on how to proceed as an investor to get pocket listings. What you need to do is reach out to, because you can't find this number out yourself. I apologize, but you can't. On a monthly basis, you need to have an agent, and you need to figure out a way to pay your agent if you're doing this, because the bottom line is, if people are providing value, they should get paid for it. Having said that, you should have your agent do a search for you where they only pull up homes that have 0 days on market. And then you need to note the listing agent and the selling agent and see if they're working for the same brokerage. 90% of the time they are. If not the same person, they work for the same brokerage. But you need to get direct contact with those agents, and you'll find that there are ones who do it habitually, right? Some of them cloak it in the mystique, right? I know agents who really love to push I only work with the most exclusive clients. The folks who are selling their $6 million estate in Los Altos Hills or whatever, right? Speaking as a former Los Altos Hills agent, these folks exist, sadly. But they leverage off of that exclusivity, and then they tell them, well, only the finest people do pocket listings, right? We don't want the rabble walking into your beautiful home and putting their dirty shoes on your carpet. There's a whole long list of stupid things that real estate agents will say to convince you a pocket listing is the way to go. Now, are there moments when a pocket listing might make sense for some reason? I suppose there might be circumstances where it would, but I can't think of any. Maybe Howard can, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. So anyway, get a relationship with a real estate agent. On a monthly basis, have them pull up all of the listings that had 0 days on market, and those are all pocket listings, right? The agent simply did the pocket listing, and then because they're a realtor, they entered it in the MLS for statistical reasons. And unless the seller specifically tells you, do not put this in the MLS, you're obligated to, right? As a realtor, you're kind of obligated to put every transaction in there. And you also want your stats to look good as a realtor. Now, I've had plenty of folks who don't want me to put stuff in the MLS. There have been transactions that are a different thing, but I don't care about what the MLS thinks of my stats. But in any event, that would be the way to go. You could also do a Google search on pocket listings in Santa Clara County and see there may be agents out there who advertise how wonderful they are with pocket listings and how their system is so much better than the MLS and Trulia and Zillow. Now, some others who aren't investor-minded might be thinking, well, why the hell would Howard want to do that? Why would he want to involve himself with these folks? Well, because suddenly you have a very uncrowded room bidding on a house. And that's a good thing. One of the big things that happens when you get markets where there's lots of people looking for a house is the insanity of the bid, right? Where you're calling, you're submitting your offers, the agent's telling you, yeah, well, I've got 5 offers already in hand. And then your agent's asking, well, how do I fit in? How am I at the bottom of the barrel? Am I at the top of the barrel? And all these discussions come back and forth. We all assume the listing agent's being truthful in terms of how many offers are in hand, where you fit into the offer spectrum. But is that always true? No, I don't think it is. So it's a frenzy, right? And in the chaos and frenzy, there is profit for the seller. In this scenario, it's a calm, measured conversation, usually with a very small subset. Now, Howard, a warning to you, many of these agents who are super pocket listing oriented won't just take anybody as a potential buyer. They will want you to prove that you've got X amount of funds in the bank, right? Many of them will only work with cash only buyers. So keep that in mind. There may be a bar that you need to reach in order for some of these pocket listing focused agents to work with you as a buyer. Also, if they know you're in the market, one of the first words out of their mouth is going to be for you to sign a buyer broker agreement. And the bottom line is, if you're trying to work with a ton of different pocket listing agents, you can't really sign an agreement with any one of them, right? So some of them may simply turn you down. If you're looking for off-market stuff, though, which is obvious, that was your first question, I would take a different tack. I would drive neighborhoods you think are sexy, note addresses, and again, if you need to use a real estate agent to this, I'm pretty sure this is information you can get without being a realtor. I have a thing where I just pop in the address and I get everything I need, but it'll give you a mailing address. And in fact, there are even places where you can go and spend a little money and they'll give you a list of all homes in certain areas where the mailing address for the taxes is different than the mailing address of the physical property. Those are folks you want to poke. And if you're driving neighborhoods, look for homes that are poorly maintained, where the lawn's overgrown and brown and all these other types of things. Note that address, do some quick research and see if it's owner occupied or not, and send them a postcard or send them a letter and say, hey, I'm interested in purchasing a property. I really love this neighborhood. I'm interested in purchasing a property here. I thought you might be interested in selling. Another thing to think about, Howard, is rental rates are going down right now, right? The rental rates are slowing, if not declining in many areas. Finding these properties, or not sexy, finding these properties right now, I think a list of homes where the mailing address for the taxes is different from the physical address of the home is going to be your highest percentage payback on results because of drops. And what I would suggest you do is we use my little magical tool here and we figure out where rents have dropped the most and we start there because those are the areas where it's most likely current tenants are all, hey, rents are down, man. I'd like a rent reduction on the lease. Or there's vacancies and I can't get them to rent my house at what I want because the market has come down a bit. And maybe because of my leveraged position on that property, I can't take less. So I think right now, that's where I would be doing it. That's what I think. That's what Robert would do. What would Robert do? WWR. All right. Cool. I hope I answered that for you. I think I over-answered that for you, Howard. If I missed any area you'd like to talk about, just feel free to poke me again, and I'll be glad to talk to you. Okay, let's go ahead and talk news. Where is that? There it is. All right. So this is really just an opportunity for us to sort of compare a little. Us versus the world, or us, the United States anyway. Where did I? It's always at the bottom. So we can see median list prices. Median, you go with average, and just so people know the difference. Median means if you have 100 things in a list, the median one is the one where there's 50 above and 50 below. That's median. Average is when you add up all of the thing and divide it by the number of items that had that thing, and then that tells you the average. And I like to go with average. Median I don't have a lot of use for. So we can say median year to date, down 0.2 in terms of median listing price. For us, listing price is up 4.9%. So anyway, at least original list price is up in that month. New listings up 5.3%. New listings is up 2% in the county overall. So way fewer new listings than nationally. Active listings up 23.2. We're at 19. So creeping up on it, but not there. So overall, compared to national markets, we're overperforming a bit. We're going to discount what they're talking about with listing prices. Next, let's see. Housing market softens further, setting up a challenging start to 2026. This is what I'm going to categorize as dumb headlines. Okay? This is November and December. Of course the market has softened. Are you an idiot? Have you ever looked at what numbers do in November and December? They do it every November and December, every single year. And yet every year I will still see these headlines that tell me, oh my gosh, the market has softened. Well, yeah, duh. People tend to take their homes off the market in November and December for the holidays. Buyers tend to stop coming out in November and December because of the holidays. And then in January and February, as we saw from those crazy lines that we just looked at in those graphs, everything does its thing. So I hate these headlines. These are dumb. You should not listen to them. That's why we're going to go to the next one. Pending home sales fell 6%, the biggest drop in nearly a year. So this is why doing week-to-week numbers is just absolutely stupid. So what does it say? And this is Redfin. Redfin does this crap all the time. U.S. pending home sales fell 5.8% from a year earlier. That is the number you want to know. During the 4 weeks ending December 14th. That is a decent number. It's a year-over-year comparison, right? So that's good. I mean, that's reasonable. Where was the number that annoyed me? The biggest decline since the start of 2025. Okay, well, the start of 2025 was 11 months ago. So, right. Because we're in November and December, right? Now, this is year over year, so they're comparing November to November of last year, and that's a thing, right? Or December to December. But comparing it all within the same year is dumb. And that's why we do year over year and then look back. So again, not crazy, but let's see here. On a metro level, pending sales declined in all but 6 of the 50 most populous U.S. metro areas, with the biggest drops in San Jose, California, our stomping grounds, negative 35.1% year over year. Again, that's the right number to use, year over year. Houston down 20.9 and Oakland down 17.6. The typical U.S. home that does sell is taking 52 days to go under contract, about a week longer than last year. Is that what we saw here? Days on market? Yeah. Yeah. It was 52 days in Gilroy, but it was only 32 days in Morgan Hill, 29 days in San Jose, and 30 days in Santa Clara County. So anyway, so I don't see much more that's worth talking about there. Okay. Most popular markets on Zillow in 2025. Only reason I popped this one up was because we made the list. Berkeley made the list at number 2. So what's interesting about this is, how does Zillow determine most popular markets? Determines it by searches. What do we know about Berkeley? It's a college town, right? I know. One of my sons went to Berkeley. And finding a place to live in Berkeley is a huge pain in the butt. So did I spend an awful lot of time searching for places in Berkeley? Yeah, I did. So I kind of lean into the idea that this plays heavily into it. Yeah, search trends. Anyway, I thought I'd point that out. It's yet another headline that you need to think down a level, right? Before you assume anything spectacular. November market report and 2025 market trends in review. Home sellers step back despite 3-year high in affordability. Sellers hunkered down. New listings declined 30% from October to November. This is a dumb number. Of course, listings declined from October to November. Not only do sellers frequently take their home off the market in November, so they don't have to deal with stuff during Thanksgiving and Christmas, but this happens every year. So this is a stupid takeaway. Price cuts fell from near record highs on nearly 27% of listings in October, back to seasonal norms near 21%. Mortgage payments as a share of median household income fell to 32.6, the lowest since 2022. So that's pretty good news. I mean, I like that. That's a cool thing. I don't usually put this right here in the middle, but this is my website. Sorry, shameless plug. But there is a value to this thing. If you are someone, I always have told my clients forever since I started in real estate, keep track of the value of your home, right? And see what your equity is. See if refinancing makes sense. Just do it once a year. This is a tool that if you decide to subscribe to it, it's absolutely free. I don't share your information, but this is the best tool I've ever seen. And for those of you who've worked with me, you know every single year I do a tech review of everything I offer my clients. And this has won, and again, I just finished this one a couple of weeks ago. I'm not replacing this with a new tool. So this is the third year in a row that HomeBot has remained my go-to for sexy data on your house. Now, there's two ways you can do this. You can say, Robert, I know you sneaky bugger. You just want my info. No, just go in here, enter your address, and click check, and you'll get what the current estimated value of your home is. And that's it, and you're done. You won't get any of this other stuff, but you'll get that. If you decide to subscribe, you'll get a monthly update on what the home's value is, but then you'll also get your home equity tool, purchase options, like what you can use with your equity or what you might do to your home, refinance calculator. And what's awesome about this one is it's red or green. If it's red, don't refinance. You're not going to get a better deal than the one you've got right now. If it's green, check to see why it's green. And then there's going to be a link to a local lender right here in Morgan Hill that can talk to you about real numbers and real scenarios to get a refinancing so that your payments come down. Next, mortgage summary. How much of it is going to the mortgage? How much is going to interest, et cetera, et cetera. Other important options. This one I think is like thinking of selling. What are the signals you might want to sell? How much purchasing power would you have for a new home? You could use about X amount of equity to feel more ready for a storm if you feel like you need more cash. Net worth of the home, a home renting tool. Do you want to rent out a room? Did you just do an ADU in your backyard? This is a tool for you to ballpark how much rent you'll get for that thing. So all good stuff. And if you provide your email address, obviously it'll give you that every month. So that's my big push thing. And the worst thing that's going to happen to you is you're going to get an email from me once a month, maybe twice a month, aside from the email of this thing to tell you that your numbers have changed. But anyway, so that's my big yay, Robert. Come work with me push. All right, let's talk about interest rates. We can see that little bar is in the happy place, right? So this is the 52-week trend, and the bar of where we're at is way down to the left. And after months and months of it all the way to the right, this is a nice change. I'd love to see it go lower. We can see we're still very high compared to where we were back here. Historically, this isn't bad. I know I'm an old man, and I've been in this business forever, but when I first got into real estate, interest rates, I think, were 15%. So when they went below 10%, and I was working as a real estate agent in Palo Alto, everything went nuts. Every property I'd been tracking for investment purposes sold within 48 hours of interest rates dropping below 10%, like at 9.95%. Everybody's like, well, interest rates will never be lower than this. This is insane. So everybody bought. So yeah, good numbers all the way around. One thing we can do is see what a real loan would be. I didn't bother to pull that up, so let me just do that real quick. All right, Morgan Hill purchase. Let's go with what was it? Was it 1.5? Was the thing? So let's see, 1.5 million. You'd have to come up with $300,000, and wow. Let me make sure we've got all this stuff set. Property type, single family. All right, all's good. This blows me away when I see these numbers. So 6.125% is the lowest monthly payment of $7,291 a month if you buy a $1.5 million home with 20% down. Let's see. No fees, though. That's a huge change. Last time we did this, weren't fees like $15,000 to $20,000 on a lot of these? So that's an interesting payoff. 6.125%. Fees of 0. I like that. Whoops. I don't want to go to that mortgage place. But anyway, so that's where we would be. And these are real numbers, assuming you have an excellent credit score. Another thing to note about this is look at how many options we have. Now, we've done this number before where we had 2 or 3. It has been a long time since I've seen what appears to be a full page of lenders who are putting it out there. So lenders are hot to lend. That indicates to me that lenders are hot to lend. All right. Next, here we are. This is Reventure. This is a tool I use to get all kinds of information. We can do zip codes, we can do metros, we can do counties, whatever we want to do. So there's Santa Clara County average, 1.5 million. Obviously, Morgan Hill's right there in the middle. We could do, if anybody out there has got a market that you like, that you're particularly excited about, feel free, throw a zip code at me and we can throw it in there. Let's just, I live in this one, so let's just do 95037. And there we go. There we are. So on average, they're saying 1.2. What did we say the average sales price? 1.5. So I don't know what number they're looking at or how up to date it is, but that number is wrong. The number I use is single family residentials, townhomes, and condos. It's everything. It's any residential thing you would buy. So that's that. And then this is San Martin. I love San Martin. I think San Martin is one of the best kept secrets in the county. Very much off the radar, but beautiful homes. Still pricey, but beautiful homes. Typically, the typical home that I've sold in San Martin is 3 to 5 acres. Almost all of them are horse properties, with only 2 exceptions, I think, where they didn't have any horse stuff on them. But I sold a house right over here in San Martin. Man, was it decked out! It was. It had the wife in the house was interested in dressage, which is a kind of horse competition. So you have the ones where there's mirrors, so they can check out their seat and their stride with the horse and stuff. Anyway, interesting stuff. But anyhow, so we could cover anything here. Home value growth is one that's interesting, down 1.6. Home value growth year over year, down 1.6%. Let's see. Usually when we're looking at investor metrics, they'll show something. So rental rates are interesting. Vacancy rate. Okay, wow. So let's scroll out on this one. So this means that 3.9% of currently active homes for rent are vacant. 6% in Campbell. 6.5%. Wow. So this is another number I tend to keep track of, right? So I will track homes that are for rent, particularly up here in the center, particularly close to places like Intel, Apple, the big companies, Cisco, Meta, and they're obviously spread out all on the 101, but just to see what's going on. And these are some relatively high numbers. This 10% number, what's that? Is it this? This is right by the airport. Yeah. Then 9.9 up here in Mountain View, 12.6 up at near Stanford. Wow. 14% in southern Palo Alto. So definitely interesting numbers. Anything over 10% is a scratch, is a it's a chin scratcher. Typically, you don't want to see 10%. You typically want to see 5% or a little less. But it's really interesting. Now, this is where I grew up. I grew up over here. Actually, what road is that? Prospect. So that's Prospect. And I went to Blue Hills Elementary School. I grew up right around here. Oh, is that my house right there? What street is that? If that's Duckett Way, that's my old house. I think that's Duckett Way, and I used to live right there. Anyway, I went to Limbrook High School, which is down here. But anyway, this is a great tool. If you've got areas you're interested in, feel free to reach out to me directly, and we can chat. If we want to look at trends, let's see. They've added a few here. Home sales growth, I think we already looked at. And we can year-over-year growth in home sales according to Redfin, 3-month trailing average. So that's crazy to see that number. I didn't expect to see a 23% drop in 95014. Investor score. Price is stable. Long-term appreciation. Yeah, that's all good stuff. Anyway, or we can look at monthly. So this is a great tool. When I'm helping investors figure out markets to focus on, this is a tool I'll frequently use. So anyway, it's about 15 minutes after 11, and that's about the time we call it. I think I've covered everything. One thing we could do, this is the magic real estate tool, the MLS thing that realtors get. And this is, I believe, everything that's sold in Morgan Hill. And here's an example, 0 days. And the $3.5 million house sold in 0 days. So that means that was a pocket listing. So you'd want to get in contact with this person and say, hey, I noticed that you sold a home in 0 days, which suggests you frequently will do pocket listings. I would love to be considered as a potential client for you when you get a pocket listing in the future. I hope that helps. I can't think of another way to find other agents that do pocket listings other than to do like a Google search of just do pocket listings and see how that goes. But anyway, so I'll throw it out there one more time. I didn't get any, let's see. I published the poll, and I don't know how to see the results. Oh, Lord. Yeah, I see one vote for yes. We can talk about, I guess that's the one thing we didn't talk about was the 50-year mortgage. I'm planning on I'm going to jump back into doing the podcast thing. And that was going to be my first show title, was the 50-year mortgage. In short, I think more options are better than fewer options. However, only a very disciplined borrower with a very specific set of criteria should ever consider a 50-year mortgage. If you want to buy a house and own it and live in it and stay in it forever, a 50-year mortgage makes no sense. If you are an investor who's going to hold that loan for a very short period of time and you just want to leverage this lowest holding cost possible, it might make sense. But it does not make any sense for the typical buyer who is either knows they're going to stay there forever or knows they're going to stay there for 10, 15, 20 years to do a 50-year mortgage, right? So anyway, we'll talk about that more in depth in the podcast. If you'd like to find more about that, head on over to soldbyrobert.com. There is a link there to go to the podcast. All right, folks. I hope you're ready to take on the rest of your weekend. I know I am. And I look forward to talking to you all next month when we'll cover the same data and news items that we did this month, but just next month. So again, thanks for tuning in and spending your